let's just check out the highlights of Scotland versus Germany in the first game of Euro 2024. Scotland made a great start to qualifying. Fantastic. Won their first 5 qualifiers in a row. I've never seen that before in my life. We beat Spain. And in fact, that game, Scotland beating Spain, is Spain's last defeat in a competitive game, ironically. But still, an amazing victory at Hampden. Managed to follow that up with an unbelievable comeback win in Norway, losing 1-0 in the 88th minute, and then somehow came back and won the game 2-1 out of absolutely nowhere. And those wins against Spain and Norway were Scotland's 8th and 9th wins in a row in qualifiers, taking us all the way back to 2021. Scotland ended up actually winning 11 qualifying games in a row, you know, if we take it back to the previous World Cup qualifying campaign. And it's hard to overstate how big an achievement this is. For a country like Scotland, Scotland won every single qualifier, home and away, over a 2-year period. My main introduction to the international football was when Bertie Vogts was in charge. And when Bertie Vogts was in charge, Scotland were fucking awful. It's safe to say that I, along with, you know, many other Scotland fans who started following Scotland at that time, kind of became conditioned to abandon all hope when it came to supporting the national team. It was really sad times. So, you know, the idea that Scotland could not only remain unbeaten for 11 qualifying games, but win 11 in a row is just, it's unfathomable to me. Of course, in between these qualifiers, there were some friendlies and Nation League games, among other ones, you know, that we didn't win. But, you know, we're Scotland. You've got to take the positives where you find them. Our last win was in a competitive game against Cyprus in September 2023. So we're coming up to close to a year since Scotland won a competitive game. Since that game against Cyprus in 2023 September, and in the run-up to the Euros, Scotland played 9 games. They won 1 of them. Of the 9 games, 3 of them were competitive games against Georgia, Norway and Spain. 2 draws and a defeat. The one win that we got in those 9 games was in a friendly against Georgia, who were ranked 198th in the world at the time of the match. Now, after the Euros, the record that Scotland have stands at 1 win in 12. 4 draws, 7 defeats. Conceding 28 goals, which is an average of 2.3 goals per game. So I will do a little recap of the matches that Scotland played after they defeated Cyprus, their last competitive win in September 2023. They played England, Spain, France, then Georgia, Norway, the Netherlands, Northern Ireland, and then we got that win against Gibraltar in the first of 2 warm-up games in the week before the Euros. The second of those warm-up games was against Finland, a match in which Scotland were winning 2-0 until the 72nd minute. So it's safe to say we were going to the Euros with a pretty poor recent record. So there was a bit of talk coming from the camp about making history as we went into the Euros. You know, could this Scotland team qualify from the group stages and be the first team to do so? Could this team make history and rid the country of the perpetual title of glorious failures? And the answer is, you know, basically yes to both of those. They made history by experiencing their heaviest ever defeat at any finals in their first game against Germany. And then they followed that up with 2 performances that were really pretty toothless, you know. So they managed to rid themselves of the glorious failure tag in doing so. Scotland became the 5th team in the history of the Euros to concede 5 in a single group stage game. That's the sort of history that Scotland made. So after that absolute doing against Germany, you might have assumed that Scotland would go for it against the Swiss. And 13 minutes in, it seemed like things might be looking up for Scotland when McTominay scored via that massive deflection. But then Scotland went on to finish the game with less possession than Switzerland, fewer attacks, fewer passes, and a lower passing accuracy. One of those inaccurate passes leading directly to the equalising goal by Shaqiri when Anthony Ralston inexplicably put him through with a fucking terrible misplaced pass. So the game went on to finish 1-1 with Grant Hanley hitting the post in the second half from a corner. So with Switzerland being ranked 19th in the world, this result meant that Scotland had now won only one of the last 12 games against teams in the top 20 of the FIFA World Rankings, losing 8 of them. This meant the game against Hungary is now a must-win. But to make things more complicated, Kieran Tierney had been taken off injured in the 61st minute against the Swiss and would play no part in the game against Hungary. Obviously, Kieran Tierney being injured is a massive blow to Scotland. He's a class player. He's a player that we've relied on over the years. But maybe this offers an opportunity for Steve Clarke to shake things up a bit. See, Scotland's 4-5-1 with 2 wing-backs was a formation that Steve Clarke designed solely for the purpose of accommodating both Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney. 2 quality left-sided players and arguably the first 2 names on the team sheet when they're fit. Now instead, what Clarke did was stick with the same style, the same shape, and put Scott McKenna in Tierney's position in what looked to me to be like a straight swap. 6'2" centre-back Scott McKenna was given the job of getting up the pitch, up the left-hand wing to try and create overlap opportunities. Now, as you might imagine, big Scott McKenna struggled to get up that wing and create these sort of plays. It would be natural for Kieran Tierney playing in that position. You know, he did the best he could, but he was being asked to commit to a role that isn't part of his skill set. He's not fucking Franco Baresi, you know, or Franz Beckenbauer. So in the first 20 minutes, Scotland had about 75% possession against Hungary. But important point to make, this was without putting Hungary under any sort of pressure whatsoever. And it seemed to me that Scotland were just content to keep the ball. There wasn't really any sense of urgency going forward. You know, keeping in mind that this is a must-win game. The players seemed to be just passing the ball blithely between defenders and deep-lying midfielders. And on the rare occasion, a player like McTominay or Adams managed to get through to the Hungary defence, they were just quickly swamped and lost the ball. There was simply no support for them. So at half-time, the game was 0-0. Scotland had the majority of possession and 0 efforts on goal. 0. Obviously, something had to change in the second half. Well, what changed? Well, basically nothing. Scotland stuck to the same style of play that had got them nowhere so far in this tournament. Steve Clarke made a couple of changes in the 76th minute, bringing on Armstrong and Shankland for McGinn and Adams. And then came on Ryan Christie for Gilmore and McLean for Ralston. McLean, a kind of central left midfielder, replacing Ralston, who was playing as a right wing back. I don't know if this was a sort of attacking gamble in the 83rd minute. But anyway, immediately, holes started showing up all over the place in the defence. Finally, Andy Robertson came off for Lewis Morgan in the 89th minute, and it maybe seemed that Scotland were going to have a go. So we roll on through into stoppage time. And in the 94th minute, Stuart Armstrong goes through on goal, and he gets clattered in the box by a Hungary player, and it's a certain penalty. I've watched it back a dozen times, I've seen it, it's a certain penalty. The boy's leg goes right into the back of Stuart Armstrong, then Stuart Armstrong grabs the shirt. It's a fucking penalty, but the ref says no, and he emphatically waves play on. So now Hungary look like they're going to score every time they come forward. And, you know, in the 100th minute, Hungary counter-attacked another inept Scotland attack and scored the goal that wins the game and achieves the record of being the latest goal ever to be scored at a European Championship finals in normal time. So Scotland were involved in breaking 2 records in 3 games. Their heaviest ever defeat at a Euros finals and the latest goal ever conceded at a Euro finals. Scotland were out. I mean, we knew they were out after the Germany game, but now it's confirmed, and this is fucking failure, but it's far from glorious. So, you know, Steve Clarke has achieved some pretty amazing things as Scotland boss as far as I'm concerned, but this got a lot of people really doubting his ability to take the team forward. Scotland did have some big players missing. The likes of Aaron Hickey and Lyndon Dykes were unavailable, who are both basically guaranteed starters. Whether you love Dykes or hate him, he plays an important role in that 5-4-1 setup that we've become accustomed to. You know, he's strong, he's good at winning the ball and holding it up. And Aaron Hickey's importance can't be underestimated to this squad. He's class. You know, the drop-off in ability from Hickey to Ralston is fucking massive. You're replacing Champions League quality with Championship quality. And don't get me wrong, Ralston's got plenty of heart, but he's simply not capable of playing that role at this level. You put him in the same role, you know, for Celtic in the Scottish Premiership against fucking Motherwell, and he'll do fine. But Scottish Premiership is probably the highest level that he's capable of. I don't want to throw shade, but it's true. And I mean, of course, I can sit here and say, if Ralston doesn't pass that ball to Shaqiri, then maybe we beat Switzerland 1-0. Or if Grant Hanley's header goes in instead of hitting the post, maybe we beat Switzerland 2-1. Maybe if the referee points to the spot against Hungary in the 94th minute, we score and we go on to win the game 1-0. And maybe in another dimension, somewhere Scotland qualified with 6 points. However, this would only paper over the cracks if it did happen. We're now looking at a Scotland team who share the record for the fewest attempts at goal in the history of the Euro finals. 17 attempts with 4 on target. And even the team that they share that record with, Northern Ireland, managed to qualify for the knockout stages. And I think a lot could be said about Steve Clarke's squad selection for the tournament. Obviously, he wants to harbour a club spirit, and one way of doing that is to have the same faces coming in and building up that rapport and squad spirit. It can be really useful, and we've seen the benefits of that through Scotland's winning 2 Nations League groups in a row and going up to Pot A. Scotland have got one way of playing under Clarke, and it works well, or at least it's functional, when we have all of our best players fit. But in a situation where half of the squad are not available or fully fit, the cracks start to show, and they're big cracks. Scotland have participated in 4 European Championship finals, ever. And 2 of those are under Steve Clarke. He's taken us to back-to-back Euros in 2020 and 2024. The last time that happened was 92 and 96. You know, years and years ago. But then that's overshadowed by the worst result at a finals in Scotland's history. How can it not be, you know? And looking at the squad, and I want to put up front that I think Grant Hanley did extremely well And I also think Scott McKenna did very well, considering the situation and considering potentially how little football they'd played. But if you look at that defence, Grant Hanley came back from a very serious injury. He was only involved in 8 games last season, for the whole season. Anthony Ralston, Scott McKenna, Liam Cooper, each of those guys were involved in 15 games. Ross McCrory, 19. Kieran Tierney, 20 games. He's had his problems with injuries. But that's 60% of your defenders, and between them they had 92 game involvements for the entire season. Like Stuart Armstrong, he played a lot for Southampton, but he got injured at the end of the season and he wasn't fully fit, and he can be an explosive player and useful for Scotland. I know you'll never live down that pass back that he made against England all those years ago, but he does have that ability to come on and have that explosive energy. I think a fair amount of the players who went on the plane to Germany were really seriously lacking match fitness. And don't get me wrong, all the players who went over to Germany, the entire squad, they did their best. But, I look at that and the squad and I think, we're Scotland. We can't afford to have a substantial portion of the squad going to Germany and just kind of hoping to obtain match fitness along the way. And I think in the wake of a few of the injuries and players pulling out, Clark said that he would be looking to the under-21 players to fill in the gap. And I thought that sounded sensible. You've got players like Josh Doig and Max Johnson and Liam Morrison, who had a really solid season for Wigan. This was an opportunity, I think, to show these aspiring young players that there is a pathway for them into the senior team via the under-21s. And don't get me wrong, yes, maybe some of these guys are not ready. However, giving a young player the chance to learn and experience being part of the senior squad could be the thing, the catalyst that inspires and motivates them to kick on in their development. You don't know. But, Steve Clark decided to stick with familiar faces. Apart from when Lyndon Dykes, centre forward, was injured and replaced with Lewis Morgan. A new face but a winger. And you might be asking yourself, well, where the fuck does a winger fit into Clark's extremely narrow 5-4-1 system? Nowhere. Scotland don't play with wingers in that system, We've got wing backs. We don't have wingers. So why not call up another striker to replace your injured striker? For example, Scotland under-21 Kieran Bowie, who had a solid season at Northampton in League One. And in fact, he scored their goal of the season along the way. I think, again, and I don't want to labour the point, but that's an opportunity missed to show Scotland under-21 players that there is a pathway to the big team. Or if you were going to replace him with an MLS player, why not Johnny Russell? He's a striker, he's a forward. Or if you're determined to replace him with a non-striker, then why not Ryan Gauld? He can basically play anywhere in the midfielder. A number 7, number 8, number 10, number 11, he can play just off the striker and he can play anywhere across midfield. He's been breaking records and making the headlines in the MLS for months now because of his outstanding performances and contributions to his team. He's also been named in the MLS All-Star team along with the likes of Sergio Busquets, Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi. He scored 9 and assisted 8 so far. That's 17 goal involvements in 24 games at the time of recording. These are stats I think that a lot of strikers would be proud of. Most strikers don't have numbers like that, apart from Lawrence Shankland, who played 37 games last season and was involved in 28 goals. He scored 24 and assisted 4. He was basically involved in a goal in 76% of the games that he played in the league for Hearts last season. But he got a grand total of 35 minutes across the tournament. That's including stoppage time. He came on the 82nd minute against Germany, the 91st minute against Switzerland to play the last fucking 45 seconds or whatever. And he came on from the 76th minute against Hungary. I think Steve Clarke is loyal to a fault. And I would like to know why he doesn't think that Ryan Gauld is good enough for the Scotland squad, or why a goal-scoring machine like Shankland isn't good enough to lead the line. Anyway, I've had time to calm down. A lot of my friends want Clarke out the door, out the country, off planet Earth. They want rid of him. I'll try and end on a positive note. Scotland are in Group A, the Group A pot for the Nations League. The Euros is over. If Scotland manage not to get relegated from the Nations League group and FIFA choose to use the Nations League as an indicator of what pot that teams should go in for the draw for the World Cup qualifiers, then Scotland could find themselves in pot 1, which I don't think has ever happened before. So whether you love Steve Clarke or you hate him, we're stuck with him. We've got him for at least the next Nations League and probably the World Cup qualifiers as well. He's going to be our manager. So we don't really have any other choice but to get behind the Scotland team and hope that we don't get relegated from the Nations League. That's about it, really. That's about it. Oh well. Ah well.